We're being invaded. They're taking our jobs. They're a drain on the system. These are just some of the ways that I've heard other believers describe illegal aliens. This is the Just a Thinker podcast. I'm your host, Brian Budka, and I wonder if Jesus would refer to illegal. This is the Just a Thinker podcast. I am your host, Brian Budka, and I wonder, would Jesus refer to illegal aliens, the legal term, as invaders, or would he have approached the subject differently? Do we as Christians sometimes support public policies that are incongruent with our professed biblical worldview? If so, how would we know? In episode 1, we discussed kingdom citizenship. Are we Americans first, or are we Christians first? And in light of that, perhaps, and another podcast host suggested this, that as believers in modern America, perhaps we ought to see ourselves as exiles in Babylon, like the Jews were once upon a time, held captive. Perhaps you can influence things, but you're not electing the officials. We are foreigners in a strange land. But let's do a thought experiment when it comes to this situation. Imagine for a moment that you were born in Venezuela. You and your family are there. You're struggling. Property rights are in question. Food is difficult to come by. What are you going to do? You understand that America is a place of opportunity. You don't have a way to get here legally, meaning you don't have a visa, you don't have a green card, you're not able to go through the proper immigration channels. It's difficult. Your family's starving. It's a journey, but you're willing to risk it. Are you going to go? If you and your family were there today, if that's where you were born, what are you going to do? I can tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to come here. I'm going to take my family and I'm going to travel and I'm going to struggle through what it takes to go from Venezuela to the American border. And then if need be, quite frankly, whether it's the river or a bridge I cross or however I get across, I would gladly tell the officials on the other side that you're welcome to shoot me, to jail me, to keep me on this side of the river, the bridge, whatever the case may be. But please take my family. Let them stay. Would you not do the same? It's emotional even now, and I've had this conversation many, many times with others and talk through this. But would you not? What would you do if you knew there was a place where if you just worked, you could earn enough to feed your family? You could eventually buy property to own that's not going to be taken by the government by and large. We can talk about our property tax laws later, but you have a place to live and to be safe. What are you going to do? Well, I can tell you, I am coming to the US. I would gladly start at the bottom and work my way up. And again, if it meant my death, my being left behind, but I could put my family into a safe situation which future generations could thrive, I would send them here. As believers, are we looking at this situation? Are we looking at this topic, especially during election cycles, and now the election cycles are in perpetuity? Are we seeing this the right way? As a Christian, from a biblical worldview. Paul told us in his letters to whether it's the Galatian church, the Colossian congregations, that believers were one in Christ, no longer Jew nor Greek. You say, well, maybe these aren't our brothers or sisters because if they're doing the right thing, they're not breaking the law. But are we seeing them through the lens of our identity in Jesus as a Christian, as a community of believers, and how we should treat people if we were exiles in a foreign land? Are we seeing them as Americans? How should we be approaching immigration in general, whether it's legal or illegal? If our national identity is the church, and we are exiles, if you will, in a foreign land, except in this case, we can affect the law, the legal process, the lawmaking process. Should we be approaching it differently? Is it even possible for us to have a view on this that aligns with our identity as believers while not making America more dangerous? Let me just ask you, have you ever met anyone who's come here from Venezuela and in central Texas, where I happen to live? There are quite a few, and I've got to meet some and be around their kids and know that they're productive members of society. Is it just possible that maybe you haven't thought this through as a believer, but maybe you were thinking it through tied to your job, or just without thinking about it through the lens as a believer, but maybe you were more thinking of it as a Democrat or a Republican? I asked ChatGPT, what does the Bible prescribe to believers, followers of Jesus, in terms of how we should treat foreigners? Let's take a look at what artificial intelligence tells us. The Bible provides several teachings about how believers of Jesus should treat foreigners or strangers. Here are a few key principles, ChatGPT says. Love and hospitality. The Bible emphasizes love and hospitality towards strangers. In the New Testament, Jesus teaches his followers to love their neighbors as themselves, Mark 12:31. This love extends to strangers or foreigners as exemplified in the parable of the Good Samaritan, Luke chapter 10, verses 25 through 37. We're to be welcoming to the stranger. The Old Testament contains numerous commands to welcome and care for strangers. For example, in Leviticus chapter 19, verses 33 through 34, it states, when a foreigner resides among you in your land, do not mistreat them. The foreigner residing among you must be treated as your native born. Love them as yourself, for you were foreigners in Egypt. I am the Lord your God. ChatGPT reminds us about justice and fairness. The Bible advocates for fair treatment of foreigners and strangers, urging believers to provide justice and protection for those who may be marginalized or vulnerable. It describes the illegal aliens today. How many are fearful to report crimes committed against them because they would be deported or separated from their families? How many women have not reported abuse of some sort, rape, some other assault, being trafficked for fear of being deported? And this is all outlined in Deuteronomy chapter 10, verses 17 through 19, Exodus chapter 21, verse 21, Zechariah chapter 7, verses 9 and 10. ChatGPT reminds us about compassion and empathy. Christians are encouraged to show compassion and empathy towards foreigners, recognizing their humanity and dignity. Matthew chapter 25, verses 35 through 40 in the NIV says this, for I was hungry and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me in. I needed clothes, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you looked after me. I was in prison, and you came to visit me. Then the righteous will answer him, Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you something to drink? When did we see you a stranger and invite you in, or needing clothes and clothe you? When did we see you sick or in prison and go to visit you? The king will reply, truly, I tell you, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me. Overall, the Bible encourages believers to treat foreigners with kindness and love and respect, just as they would treat their fellow citizens. The principles of hospitality, justice, and compassion form the foundation of how Christians are called to interact with foreigners and strangers in their midst. This was ChatGPT, the artificial intelligence we're so fearful of. It understands how we ought to act better than most of the people I know that are voicing their opinions on this topic. Is seeking more stringent immigration laws the answer? Is removing every barrier to entry the answer? What about costs that the taxpayers bear due to illegal immigration? These are important questions, right? Do we just punish everybody and we send them away, make things stricter? Is just opening the border, so to speak, and let every single person in? And if we did that, what are the costs to the taxpayer? Let's consider the economics of illegal immigration. Are they a net drain? Are illegal immigrants a net drain on the system? Are they more taking versus giving? Right? Are they a net contributor or a net taker? I don't know about you, but for many years, I assumed for many years that the folks coming here illegally were seeking to have anchor babies, walk across the border, drop a kid, be here for life, live on the back of taxpayers. Is that accurate? What does the data tell us? We can go back more than 20 years to an ACLU article, which I know most people are not going to be excited about, but let's look at what the ACLU says 20 years ago in an article titled Immigrants in the Economy, and this was dated March 12, 2002. There are some really interesting things that this article points out. One, there's some fallacies. People will say they're taking our jobs. Here's the truth. There's not a fixed number of jobs. So no, illegal aliens are not taking your job. They are actually filling jobs that most Americans really aren't doing. And you hear that, you say that's a cliche. They're doing the jobs we don't want to do, but it is indeed true. And we'll talk about this. Back as far back as 2002, and this has been going on for a long time, immigrants paid more than 90 billion with a B billion dollars in taxes every year and received only about $5 billion in welfare. They were a net positive to the economy. And a matter of fact, without their contribution, the economy would be worse off. Matter of fact, a 1994 study of unemployment and immigration by Richard Vedder and Lowell Galloway of Ohio University, spanning 100 years from 1891 to 1991, found that higher rates of foreign-born population historically corresponded to lower unemployment rates. Pretty interesting. The study found that immigrants expanded total output and the demand for labor. They tend to be highly productive and promote capital formation through their high savings rates. Most Americans have a very low, sometimes a negative savings rate. They're a benefit to the economy because of the culture, their values that they're bringing. If we skip forward to an article from the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities from August 15th, 2019, talking about the title of the article is Immigrants Contribute Greatly to U.S. Economy. In 2018, the labor force participation rate, meaning those who were of the age that could be working and should be working, that's the participation rate. So in 2018, the labor force participation rate of foreign-born adults was 65.7%, 65.7%, which is higher than the 62.3% for the native-born. So again, not quite 10%, but significantly more foreign-born adults who were in the age that could be working were versus native-born Americans. Pretty interesting. We have to consider that. In March of 2018, immigrants with less than a 4-year degree made up 10% of all people and 11% of all U.S. workers in the U.S. But they reflected a large share of all workers in many occupations, important occupations, but ones where Americans typically aren't filling the void. 36% of workers in farming, fishing, and forestry are immigrants without a college degree, as are 36% of building and grounds, cleaning and maintenance workers, 27% of hotel workers, 21% of home healthcare workers. These are entry-level roles that most Americans are not interested in filling. How do we know this? Because the jobs are going to the people who will take them. It's not that the workers are sneaking across the border and undercutting Americans. Most Americans do not want to be the maintenance worker. They don't want that entry-level role. They're not going to be the hotel worker in the entry-level role, or think of home health care. This is not most Americans. Most Americans are looking for and seeking out higher skilled roles, and the illegal immigrants are filling the need. In these and other jobs, again, they're filling key gaps. There would be huge missings, okay, if we didn't have them. This is a significant issue. It's also important to know that our fertility rate, we're not replacing people in the U.S. U.S.-born folks are not replacing those who are passing from this life to the next fast enough. So if we're not bringing in immigrants, legal or otherwise, if we're not encouraging much more immigration than we've been having, this is going to put a huge burden on our current system, because our retirement program, Social Security, is not a retirement fund. It is a tax and redistribution program. This is going to offend many of the 5 people who will listen to this episode, but that's the fact. Social Security is a tax that I pay now, my son pays now, my wife pays now, in which my parents benefit, my in-laws benefit. And when I go to retire, I will take that check, but it won't be something that's a savings account that I've built up with the government, because there's really no account. Yes, they keep track of the money, but it's not really there for me to pass on to my children. We need the immigrants here contributing to the system, because we don't have enough US born folks having big enough families to replace those who are passing away on an annual basis. If you go to a Cato article from March of 2023, fiscal impact of immigration in the US, this one is really great as well. Again, very eye-opening. Immigrants ultimately have a positive net fiscal impact, meaning they are contributing today more than they're taking away. The Cato model found that immigrants who arrive at age 25 and who are high school dropouts have a net fiscal impact of over $216,000 at that time in net present value terms, which does not include their descendants. If you include descendants, those fiscal impacts are still a positive $57,000. Here's the key. By comparison, native-born American high school dropouts of the same age have a net fiscal impact of negative $32,000. It cost us. The taxpayer is paying them. And that negative impact increases to a negative $177,000 when their descendants are included. Again, this data is not just something Cato makes up. They're pulling government data. Take a look at these articles from the ACLU, and you can do plenty of research online. And you will, if you pay attention to not just the crime, which we need to handle that, but you pay attention to real net impact, and it is positive. So if I loved my neighbor as myself, would I not treat the illegal alien whose only crime is crossing the border without permission? Would I treat them better? Sure. If they've killed someone to get here, that's a crime. If they've threatened a property owner with physical harm or damaged their property in significant ways to get here, or damaged their property, sure, those are crimes can be taken care of. Again, if they're committing horrible crimes, shouldn't let them in. We don't want to have people here who are violent criminals. But if their only crime is passing that border and they didn't damage property to get here, they didn't kill someone, should we be treating them better? Would I refer to them as invaders? Should I? I know those that I have met, fellow believers. I don't think of them as invaders. But why do I dehumanize the whole group? Why do I hold the whole group accountable for the actions of a few? Again, those who commit violent crimes while they're here, we should be prosecuting them, sending them back, doing whatever it takes to keep them off the street. We should not encourage foreign countries to send their criminals here. We don't want that. But it is possible to push our leaders to make it easier for those who are desperate to get here to come here and work so they're not committing crimes, getting here just by crossing the border. But if I were born outside the US and I saw that as a way to help my family thrive, would I break the border laws to get here? Yeah, I would. Brian, as a believer, as a Holy Spirit filled, baptized in Jesus' name believer, would you do that? Yes, I would. If I need to repent of that sin after I get across the border, I would still do it. I would want to be in a better place. I don't believe that I would be changing Venezuela by staying there. If I love my neighbor as myself, can I pick a side in this discussion that would expect others to live as I would, as a Christian, even if they weren't? Don't I know that it was mere chance that I was born in this country? Just chance. I won the lottery of where you could be born by being born here. Brian, can we bring everybody in? You're saying everybody in the whole world? Well, no, naturally, everybody in the whole world wouldn't fit. Everybody in the whole world wouldn't want to come. But we could do things differently. I know that all my thoughts on these issues are not perfect and they're not correct. I know there's room for improvement when it comes to aligning them with the Bible. And there's a chance I've gotten some of this wrong even today. But I can tell you that if we talked 10 or 15 years ago, I'd be on the side of those folks going, they're invaders. They're taking our jobs. They're killing people. Some of those things are true. There are illegal aliens who've come more than once and caused harm. There are ways we can fix that. But I believe I'm far closer today to what is correct than I was 10 or 15 years ago. If, as a follower of Jesus the Messiah, I am to be a peacemaker between rival groups, the political elite, the progressives and conservatives, am I not required to do things differently, even when it comes to laws? My own life ought to reflect the highest standards because I'm a follower of Jesus. Yet I fall short. At the same time, I have to protect the rights of others to do things that I find contrary to living our best life. I have to protect their right to live their life the way they would like, because I really don't think it makes sense for me to use a lot of coercion to make people love the Lord thy God, to love Jesus the way I'm striving to. If anything else, as believers, Spirit-filled believers, should we not know that laws don't change hearts? They convict us after the fact. Did the Old Testament not teach us that? Jesus changes the heart, laws don't. So as the Lord works on mine and works on yours, shouldn't we be thinking about these things? You might ask and say, well, if you have these alleged illegal aliens in your congregation, shouldn't we have them seek out the proper method of rectifying their immigration status once they become part of the body of believers? Absolutely. Absolutely. We have people coming to the Lord that have come here from other countries, then become believers. We should help them get right with the law. Should not we in the church, the body of believers, help them? Sure, we should. We should help them get things right with the law. They shouldn't be living in fear. And if somewhere along the line they committed a real property crime, they've killed someone, they've damaged someone's property in a significant way, they just didn't hop a fence and maybe move a post, yes, we should help them make things right. That's what believers do. But many of those people that are coming across, they're not believers, or not like we may believe, but they are seeking a better life. And we can make an impact by how we think about these things and how we talk about them. And why shouldn't we be leading the way with compassion so that those who are here illegally can be seen and do things that are actually important to them? If you want to see wages come up, make it easier for people to get here. Because yes, some illegal aliens will work for less because it gets them a job. They're being competitive. Nothing wrong with that. But also, they might be fearful of negotiating for higher pay. If you are concerned about that, if you're one of the folks that falls on the side that, yes, they should be paid a fair wage, then here's what we need to do. We need to rethink these laws. We need to look at them differently. We need to make it easier for nonviolent criminals to get here, or nonviolent people to get here. We do not want criminals with a violent history. There we go. We'll figure out how to say this. We want people who are not violent criminals. We prefer no criminals at all, but not violent criminals. I've had plenty of speeding tickets. That shouldn't prevent someone from coming to the U.S. Why not push our leaders to create some real reform, to work better with those other countries, to make it easy to identify who a person is? Do they have a violent criminal past? And make it easy for them to come here and work so they can come through the gates and not climbing fences or digging under them. You know why this is also important? Then if we change the flow to more legal immigration, then those who are sneaking across the border are the real criminals. They're the ones trafficking women and children. They're the ones bringing drugs. But if we can filter out the vast majority who are here that are not criminals, matter of fact, I've not met too many that are criminals, thankfully. But then we can also reduce the crime that's committed against those who are, again, their crime was crossing the border, but there's crime committed against those folks. And they don't want to call the police, right? Because they don't want to bring awareness to their situation. Why should we allow our harsh immigration policies to foster a black market that is full of various forms of slavery? Most of those folks, again, they're not drug dealers. They're not criminals. They're not MS-13. They're not the cartel. They're coming here to work. We need to be thinking about that. We need to be discussing that. And we need to see those marginalized folks that some of us are calling invaders, and instead think of them as Jesus, or perhaps Mr. Rogers would, as our neighbor. Just think about it. Just pray about it.